You may have fasted for 16 hours, 18 hours, maybe even 20. You pushed through hunger, drank your black coffee, and felt proud for doing everything right. But then comes your first meal, and with one seemingly healthy choice, all that effort can disappear. The problem is, most people don't even realize they've made a mistake. In this video, we're breaking down the #1 mistake people make when breaking a fast. It's incredibly common, completely well-intentioned, and yet biologically powerful in the worst way. This isn't about lacking discipline or not fasting long enough. It's about timing, hormones, and what happens inside your body the moment you eat again. If you've ever wondered why you fast consistently but still feel hungry soon after eating, crash in the afternoon, or struggle to lose stubborn belly fat, the issue may not be how long you fast, but what you eat first. And modern metabolic science explains exactly why this matters. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and watch until the end. One simple change in how you break your fast can dramatically improve your energy, satiety, and fat loss results. And once you understand this, you'll never break a fast the same way again. The biggest mistake in intermittent fasting is not how long you fast, but what happens in the very first moments when you eat again. This is a metabolic blind spot that few people are warned about. They push through hunger, complete a 16 or 18-hour fast feeling accomplished, and then unknowingly undo the entire metabolic state within minutes of their first meal. Ironically, they often do this using foods widely labeled as healthy. In the process, bananas, toast, oatmeal with honey, fruit smoothies, or juice are common choices. These foods are frequently promoted as nutritious and wholesome, but biology does not operate on food labels. It operates on timing, hormones, and the metabolic state of the body at a given moment. And after an extended fast, that biological context is completely different from any other time of day. Throughout fasting, insulin, the hormone responsible for energy storage, gradually drops. This low insulin state allows fat burning to occur. At the same time, insulin sensitivity rises significantly. The body becomes extremely responsive to food, especially carbohydrates. From an evolutionary perspective, this was advantageous. When food appeared after scarcity, the body needed to react quickly. In the modern environment, however, this same response can work against fat loss. When the first meal after fasting consists primarily of carbohydrates, particularly simple carbs or sugar, blood glucose rises rapidly. Because insulin sensitivity is high, the body releases a disproportionately large insulin response. Fat burning shuts down almost immediately. The metabolic state achieved through hours of fasting ends within minutes, and the body shifts back into storage mode. The consequences don't stop there. A sharp insulin spike is often followed by a rapid blood sugar drop. This explains why many people feel tired, foggy, or hungry again within 1 or 2 hours after breaking a fast. Even after eating what seems like a sufficient meal, they enter a familiar cycle. Eat, spike, crash, crave, eat again, and they wonder why fasting hasn't reduced belly fat or improved their relationship with food. The key insight is that carbohydrates themselves are not the problem. Bananas aren't bad. Oats aren't harmful. Fruit isn't the enemy. The issue is timing. Eating carbohydrates after a protein and fat-rich meal produces a very different metabolic response than consuming them immediately after a prolonged fast. In fasting, the first meal acts as a metabolic signal that influences the rest of the day. Smoothies represent a more subtle mistake. They appear balanced fruit, protein, fiber, but blending carbohydrates into liquid form accelerates absorption. Liquid sugars hit the bloodstream faster than whole foods, amplifying insulin response at the most sensitive moment. Many people believe they are eating intelligently while unknowingly creating a metabolic shock. Understanding this core mistake reframes fasting entirely. Fasting does not fail because of weak discipline or insufficient effort. It fails because the wrong biological signal is sent when the body is most sensitive. Once this becomes clear, The way you approach the first meal after fasting changes not from fear of food, but from respect for how the body truly functions. To understand why a seemingly healthy meal can undo the benefits of fasting, we need to look at the central regulator of metabolism: insulin. Not because insulin is harmful, but because it determines whether the body is in fuel use mode or fuel storage mode. Fasting works by allowing insulin to remain low long enough for fat burning to occur. After approximately 12 to 16 hours without food, insulin is no longer being constantly stimulated by frequent meals. At this point, readily available glucose is depleted, and the body shifts towards stored energy. Fat tissue releases fatty acids, the liver adjusts fuel processing, and the system enters a more efficient metabolic rhythm. Many people notice clearer thinking and steadier energy at this stage, signs of a metabolic sweet spot created by low insulin. At the same time, another crucial change takes place. Insulin sensitivity increases dramatically. This means the body responds more powerfully to carbohydrates than usual. From an evolutionary standpoint, this was advantageous. After scarcity, rapid energy storage improved survival. In the modern environment, however, this heightened sensitivity can easily be misused. The problem emerges with the first meal after fasting. When carbohydrates, especially simple carbs or sugars, are consumed while insulin sensitivity is at its peak, blood glucose rises rapidly. The body responds by releasing a large amount of insulin. This response is disproportionate to the actual need, and it immediately halts fat burning. The metabolic state achieved through hours of fasting is shut down, and the body switches back into storage mode. Worse still, a sharp insulin spike is often followed by a rapid drop in blood glucose. As glucose is cleared from the bloodstream too quickly, the brain and other tissues experience a temporary energy shortfall. This manifests as fatigue, sleepiness, brain fog, and early hunger. This is not a sign of poor metabolism, but a predictable physiological response to extreme blood sugar fluctuations. This sequence creates a familiar cycle for many who fast. Break the fast. Feel hungry again soon. Eat more. Spike again. Crash again. Each loop reinforces insulin volatility and weakens the body's ability to rely on fat for fuel. Ironically, many respond by fasting longer or restricting harder, unaware that the core issue lies in the biological signal sent by the first meal. It's important to recognize that the body is not working against you. It is following deeply ingrained biological programming. When insulin sensitivity is high, a strong response to carbohydrates is expected. Fasting fails not because of insufficient discipline, but because a survival reflex is triggered at the wrong time for modern metabolic goals. Understanding this central mechanism reframes fasting entirely. It becomes less about endurance and more about hormonal coordination. The first meal after fasting is not just nourishment, it is a metabolic message. That message determines whether the body remains in a fat-friendly state or returns to the familiar cycle of storage. And when that message is sent incorrectly, even 16 or 20 hours of fasting can lose much of their impact. Once the roles of insulin and post-fasting insulin sensitivity are clear, it becomes easier to understand a state that many people experience but rarely explain correctly. The blood sugar roller coaster. This is not a failure of willpower or discipline. It is a predictable biological outcome of sending the wrong metabolic signals at the wrong time. The cycle often begins innocently. After a prolonged fast, the body is highly sensitive. When carbohydrates are introduced as the first meal, blood glucose rises quickly. Insulin responds aggressively to move glucose into cells. On the surface, this seems normal energy is delivered. Blood sugar is controlled. But underneath, the rapid insulin surge sets the stage for the next problem. As insulin clears glucose from the bloodstream too efficiently, blood sugar can drop below optimal levels. The brain, which relies on stable energy supply, senses this immediately. Fatigue appears, concentration drops, and mental clarity fades. Many describe this as brain fog, not because total energy is lacking, but because energy delivery has become unstable. At the same time, hunger signals return. This often happens within 1 to 2 hours, sometimes sooner. Unlike the gradual hunger felt during fasting, this hunger feels urgent and is often paired with strong cravings, particularly for carbohydrates and sweets. From a biological standpoint, this makes sense. When blood sugar falls rapidly, the body seeks the fastest way to raise it again. The cycle then reinforces itself. The individual eats to relieve hunger, often choosing carbohydrates for quick relief. Blood sugar spikes again. Insulin rises again, and another crash follows. Each loop destabilizes daily energy and reduces metabolic flexibility. The body becomes increasingly dependent on immediate glucose and increasingly resistant to returning to fat as a primary fuel source. Over time, fasting begins to feel like a struggle. Thoughts about food become constant. Energy fluctuates throughout the day. Despite long fasting windows, belly fat remains unchanged. The promised benefits of fasting seem out of reach. Ironically, this happens not because fasting doesn't work, but because the way the fast is broken recreates the very metabolic instability. Fasting aims to resolve at a metabolic level. The blood sugar roller coaster reflects insulin being activated in the wrong context. Instead of guiding energy smoothly, insulin is repeatedly spiked and crashed. This environment discourages fat burning and promotes storage. In such cases, fasting fails not due to insufficient duration, but because the first meal reintroduces the same metabolic stress fasting was meant to reduce. The key takeaway is this: fatigue, brain fog, and constant cravings are not signs that fasting is unsuitable for you. They are often signs that blood sugar signals are being mishandled. When those signals are corrected, fasting stops feeling like a battle and begins to feel stable, sustainable, and naturally supportive of fat loss and energy balance. After understanding why breaking a fast with carbohydrates pulls the body into a blood sugar roller coaster, the next question becomes clear. How should a fast be broken in a biologically correct way? The answer is not fasting longer or eating less. It's about sending the right hormonal signal with the very first meal. This is where protein and fat become central. Protein is the most important component of a fast-breaking meal because it promotes satiety without causing a sharp blood sugar rise. Protein does stimulate insulin, but in a controlled and moderate way. At the same time, it activates satiety hormones such as GLP-1 and PY, signaling to the brain that the body has been properly nourished. The result is a state of fullness that feels stable and calm, rather than urgent or fleeting. Dietary fat plays a critical supporting role. Fat slows digestion, moderates nutrient absorption, and does not strongly stimulate insulin. When combined with protein, fat allows the body to transition smoothly from the fasted state into the fed state without metabolic shock. Instead of abruptly shutting down fat burning, the body gradually downshifts, preserving metabolic flexibility. This combination helps maintain a hormone environment that remains favorable for fat utilization even after eating begins. Fasting does not truly end at the moment you eat. It ends with how you eat. That distinction explains why many people fast correctly but still struggle with results. Appropriate food choices for breaking a fast are therefore simple and practical. Eggs are a classic example. High-quality protein, natural fat, and minimal carbohydrates. Eggs prepared plainly scrambled, fried, or as an omelet with non-starchy vegetables create a remarkably stable metabolic response. Meat and fish work similarly, especially when minimally processed. Eggs paired with avocado or full-fat, unsweetened Greek yogurt also fit the same principle. High protein, moderate fat, very low carbohydrate. Protein shakes can also work, but only when kept metabolically clean. Protein powder mixed with water or unsweetened almond milk, possibly with a small amount of fat from nut butter, maintains insulin stability. The issue isn't the shake itself. It's turning it into a liquid carbohydrate meal with fruit, honey, or sweetened milk. A crucial clarification is that carbohydrates are not forbidden. Fasting is not anti-carb. The difference lies in timing. After breaking the fast with protein and fat, insulin sensitivity is no longer at its peak. Adding carbohydrates later in the eating window produces a much gentler response. The same food eaten in a different hormonal context leads to a completely different outcome. When a fast is broken correctly, the benefits become tangible. Fullness lasts for hours instead of minutes. Energy remains steady throughout the day. Food cravings diminish because blood sugar no longer swings dramatically. Most importantly, fat loss resumes as the body remains metabolically flexible instead of being locked into storage mode. This approach does not require more willpower or extreme discipline. It simply requires understanding biology and respecting the body's most sensitive moment. When the first signal is sent correctly, everything that follows becomes easier. Fasting stops feeling like a battle and starts functioning as a cooperative rhythm between conscious choice and biological intelligence. Even after understanding that breaking a fast with protein and fat is biologically sound, many people fall into a more subtle trap: the healthy look protein smoothie. This mistake is common because it appears scientific, convenient, and aligned with a busy lifestyle. Protein, fruit, milk, oats. It sounds like a perfect meal. Yet this combination quietly undermines the metabolic advantages created by fasting. The problem is not protein itself. The problem lies in the form and timing of carbohydrate intake. When protein is blended with fruit, sweetened milk, honey, or oats, carbohydrates are delivered in liquid form. Liquid sugars bypass much of the digestive slowdown that solid foods require. They enter the bloodstream rapidly, causing a faster and stronger rise in blood glucose, especially dangerous right after fasting. When insulin sensitivity is at its peak compared to a solid meal of eggs, meat, or fish, a smoothie creates a completely different metabolic response. Solid foods require chewing and digestion, which naturally slows glucose absorption. Liquid carbohydrates skip these protective steps. As a result, insulin must respond aggressively to manage the sudden glucose surge. Fat burning shuts down quickly, sometimes even more abruptly than with solid carbohydrates. What makes this mistake particularly deceptive is the feeling of doing things right. People who break their fast with smoothies often believe they are eating cleanly and intelligently. But biology does not respond to moral labels or health marketing. It responds to the speed and intensity of glucose and insulin signals. A carb-heavy liquid meal sends a powerful signal at the most sensitive metabolic moment. The consequences show up quickly. Fullness fades fast. Energy spikes and crashes. Brain fog returns. Hunger and cravings reappear within 1 to 2 hours. Many misinterpret this as inadequate protein or poor fasting adaptation when the real issue is hidden liquid sugar in the first meal. This does not mean protein shakes or smoothies are always bad. They can work well later in the eating window after the fast has been properly broken with protein and fat, or at times when insulin sensitivity is lower. But for the first meal after fasting, simplicity is critical. A proper fast-breaking shake should contain protein powder, water, or unsweetened almond milk, and possibly a small amount of fat. Nothing more. This common mistake highlights an important lesson. Fasting success depends not only on food choices, but on form, timing, and biological context. Once this is understood, fasting becomes far less restrictive and far more effective. When the way a fast is broken is corrected biologically, the first changes often appear surprisingly fast. Without fasting longer or applying more discipline, simply sending the right hormonal signal with the first meal leads to a completely different response from the body. The most noticeable shift is long-lasting satiety. Instead of feeling hungry again within 1 or 2 hours, fullness becomes deeper and more stable, often lasting 4 to 5 hours. This is not the temporary fullness caused by blood sugar spikes, but true physiological satiety driven by proper hormonal signaling. With hunger quieted, eating throughout the rest of the day becomes far easier. Alongside this comes stable energy. Afternoon crashes fade. The constant need for caffeine or sugar disappears. Mental clarity improves as the brain receives a steady supply of energy. The brain fog many experience when breaking a fast incorrectly gradually lifts, replaced by sustained focus and alertness. As blood sugar stabilizes, snacking and cravings decline sharply. Eating no longer feels like a constant negotiation or a test of willpower. This matters because reduced cravings are not about discipline. They are a direct consequence of metabolic stability. From a fat loss perspective, this is when real progress begins. Fat loss occurs not because of restriction, but because the body is no longer forced out of fat-burning mode each time eating resumes. Insulin stability allows stored fat to be accessed naturally and consistently. Perhaps the most profound change is in one's relationship with food. Without the hunger crash craving cycle, food loses its emotional charge. Eating becomes nourishment again, not a source of stress or guilt. These outcomes highlight a central truth. Fasting does not need to be harsh to be effective. When the core mistake is corrected, fasting becomes supportive rather than punishing. Often the biggest breakthroughs don't come from trying harder, but from understanding better. When we step back and look at the full picture, the reason fasting fails for so many people is not the length of the fast or a lack of discipline. It comes down to a misunderstanding of biology at the most critical moment, the moment you eat again. Fasting doesn't fail because your body is resistant. It fails because the wrong hormonal signal is sent when the body is most sensitive. Modern science makes one thing very clear. The human body does not operate on moral rules of good foods and bad foods. It operates on biological context. The same food eaten at a different time can produce a completely different response. Once this is understood, fasting stops being a test of willpower and becomes a smart collaboration with hormones, energy regulation, and natural rhythms. When a fast is broken correctly, everything becomes easier. Longer satiety, stable energy, clearer thinking, sustainable fat loss, and a healthier relationship with food. No extremes, no unnecessary restriction, just the right signal at the right time. And this leads to a broader message. Real health doesn't come from controlling the body more aggressively. It comes from understanding it more deeply. When you stop fighting biology and start working with it, results improve and become far easier to maintain. If this video helped you see your body more clearly, consider subscribing to the channel and turning on notifications. Here, we don't chase trends or promise quick fixes. We explain why your body works the way it does so you can make informed, sustainable choices for long-term health. Thanks for watching until the end. I'll see you in the next video, where science helps you live better, not battle your body.